Welcome to Arts and Music, and I'm your host, Victor Janflone. Today I'm pleased to bring you Tom Adams, musician. Tom Adams, welcome to the show. I'm so pleased to have you show up via Skype.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me to come and chat.
Yeah, and I found you. I was listening to BBC Six, I believe it's a new artist show or something, and I just heard your music and said, wow, this is great stuff, man. So
cool, thank you.
Thank you. So how was it growing up near Cambridge?
I mean, it's a beautiful place to grow up. It's very, very quiet. I lived in a small village sort of just outside of Cambridge, and there's just a lot of quiet in the evenings, and you feel like you're out in nature a bit more. Mm-hmm. It's a bit of a contrast to being in Berlin, actually.
So did you have a favorite secret place when you were young?
Mostly, I was just hanging out at the skate park. That was the main location.
That was the secret place, was the skate park.
Yeah, the thing is, when you grow up in the countryside, you just want to be in. You just miss all the stuff about a city because you see all the other kids, and they're like, "Oh, look, those kids get to go to amazing skate parks, or they've got this, or they could just go around the corner and watch a film or buy ice cream." And when you're living in a small village, you don't really appreciate that you've got all this silent nature and this beautiful surrounding. You just want to go and be do all the cool stuff.
Yeah. So were you an avid skater?
Yeah, I still am, actually. I picked it back up a few years ago.
And you have no broken bones?
Not so far, but lots of bruised shins.
Well, hey, you're doing well, I guess, then, right? When did you start playing music?
So I've been having piano lessons since I was very young. Both my parents made and still make music, so they sort of pushed. I have a sister as well, and they got us to both start piano lessons in a very relaxed way, really, but at quite a young age, sort of 5 or 6, I think. And I didn't really get on with it. And it wasn't until a bit later as a teenager that I started playing electric guitar that I kind of actually started to really enjoy making music for myself.
About when did you make that step to decide, hey, I'm going to start doing my own stuff?
Sort of as 18, 19, that sort of age. That was when I really just realized that it was a lot more fun to do my own stuff. And also in the school system we're in, you could either perform your own composition or perform somebody else's. If you're doing like an exam or something, like a performance exam. And I quite quickly worked out that if you're playing your own composition, then you couldn't screw it up. Nobody had ever heard it before, so they couldn't tell if you were playing it wrong. Whereas if you're playing a well-known piece of Vivaldi or something, then they can tell straight away if you got a wrong note.
Right. Now, the people hear your music, now they can tell, I guess.
Yeah. I hope so.
So who has been a musical influence to you?
Most recently, I've been really following a producer called John Hopkins. He's a British producer, and he's just really, I like what he does because it's a nice sound, but also it's really cool because he kind of makes electronic music and film music, and he also has done some really fantastic collaborations with folk singers, and it's a very broad range of styles, but it's always got his sound to it. And I think I really admire that in any musician who can sort of do a number of different things while still keeping their, still sounding like them.
Mm-hmm. So he's more of that, like a lighter producer kind of guy, like not so much a heavy sound, but a...
Yeah, I mean, he's got a very distinct sound. He just finds ways to make it work in different situations.
More unique.
I think yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. I think it's very easy as an artist to, once you kind of get something that works really well and people like it, to just sort of keep doing the same thing over, or be tempted to be like, well, I could do another one of those because that went really well. And I think it's quite hard to sort of, you very rarely see a kind of pop band break out and do a film soundtrack or do a classical record or anything like that.
Right.
I think it's, I think you build an audience and you start working with a label and you kind of increasingly put yourself in a box. And so I'm always in admiration of artists and bands that can kind of break out of their box and do something different with their sound.
Do you consider yourself sensitive? And does that sensitivity help with your creativity?
sensitive to what?
To everything.
To
Like
everything.
just a sensitive being. Like, I mean, I myself, I consider myself very sensitive. I've had people tell me and say, Vic, you're way too sensitive. But, you know, my sensitivity gives me the creativity, I feel.
I think that's exactly it. I guess in that context, I'd say yes, for sure. I think anyone who creates anything, if it's art or photography or poetry or music, they have to be very in tune and very sensitive towards something which is feeding their inspiration. And so I think you kind of, in a way, you're lucky when you're making creative stuff, because you can kind of self-indulge a particular sensitivity towards a series of emotions or moods or things that inspire you much more than you would kind of let yourself do otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're trying to write a song, how do you write a song? Is there a certain formula, method you use, or do you it just happens?
It tends to just happen. I'm sort of, most commonly, I mean, having a shower, or I'm out for a walk or something, and just something pops into my head. And for a while, I kind of back and forth to see if it's already a song, because you know how you're just walking along and then a hook pops into your head and you can't remember. It's like, that was a band. What was that band? That kind of situation. I do that, and then sometimes I can't work it out, so I just write it and then play it to a few friends and see if anyone recognizes it. And then when they don't, I sort of start working more into my own material, and then it takes on a life of its own. I've also, more recently, I've started writing verses and choruses separately. So I'll have a good chorus hook, which works really well for me, but can't find, anything else to do with the song. I just have a nice 16 bars or something. But I just kind of put it on the shelf for a bit. And then at some point later in the year or later in life, you're just sort of playing something else. And yeah, exactly. Or you're just jamming on something. You suddenly realize you could go to the chorus from what you're jamming. And then you connect these two bits, which were written quite a long time apart from each other.
How do you classify your music? Or do you classify it in a certain...
I guess iTunes would call it singer-songwriter.
Oh,
but
that's kind of bland.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're a solo artist on stage singing, people would call you a singer. But because I write a lot of music that isn't vocal based, I just sort of think of it all as composition. And sometimes you're writing for the voice, and sometimes you're just writing for a string line, or just writing solo piano, or writing for synthesizers. It's all kind of part of composing. And so I know a lot of songwriters who they are songwriting. That's the only thing they do, is just them and a guitar, and sort of it's all about the words and the experiences, and that's their way of getting stuff out. But for me, it's much more of I also, because I do a number of other things, I just sometimes happen to write a piece that's for the voice, and other times I don't. And so it's a little bit more haphazard in that way.
So how many years have you lived in Berlin now?
This is my second year.
Oh, so it's fairly recent.
Yeah, still relatively new.
Oh, I thought you were there a little longer. Is there a certain creative buzz that you feel in Berlin?
Yeah, absolutely. There's two things really happening in Berlin which I'm tuning into. There's the whole techno house scene, which of course is world famous, I think, for the various clubs here. But there's also this kind of modern classical scene based around composers like Nils Fram and film composer Johan Johansson, and a number of artists who are doing a similar kind of crossover between cinematic and electronic sound. And because Berlin's actually quite a small place, and there's only so many venues, you just end up bumping into people all the time. And every time I meet someone, I discover that we've got a friend in common, or some contact in common, or something like that. So it's a very easy place to casually meet interesting people.
Do you perform there often?
Not as often as I'd like, actually. It's I've mostly been playing elsewhere in Europe, but it's I actually have a show. I played a show last week in this old radio venue called the Funkhaus, and that was a lot of fun.
That was in Berlin.
That was in Berlin, and I'm doing a EP launch show here in May when the record comes out, which is on the 5th of May, and I think we'll do a small show around then. I was having said I don't play in Berlin much. I've got a third show, which is on Record Store Day. I'll just be spinning some records and singing a couple of songs in a nearby record shop here. So, but up until now, I haven't been playing that many shows.
But see, now it's starting to happen. Now you're getting some
Yeah,
shows,
yeah.
which is
That's
great.
okay, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Is there any particular artist you would like to collaborate with?
I've always, do you know Bootsy Collins, the bass player?
Yeah,
I've
sure.
always thought it'd be great to make a record with him.
I used to listen to them, man, when they were like popular. So maybe I'm showing my age now, but
No, I mean, it's just, he looks like it'd be so fun to make a record with. And also, you know, it'd just be cool to make some electronic music with him, I think. It's just some really funky, deep grooves.
oh, for
And just like
sure, definitely
with
some
some
deep
great
grooves.
bass.
Yeah, yeah.
I've always thought that'd just be off the wall.
What do you think of like Brian Eno?
Yeah, Brian Eno is amazing. What he's really done, I think, is introduce kind of thinking about music into kind of more popular culture. Because a lot of music thinking happens in universities, but it very rarely seems to translate out into the real world that much. But I
Yes.
think Brian Eno's been really good at just by thinking about what it means to be creative and how you can continue to be creative and not get stuck in particular ruts.
And kind of a
Kind of
pioneer, you know. I mean, definitely like a pioneer with the orchestrated sound, kind of with
absolutely.
effectual,
I mean,
you know.
did he invent the word ambient music? I think sort of it was on his music for airports that so he first used the phrase ambient music, which is now such a commonplace phrase for so many types of music.
Does your environment reflect in your music?
Yes, very much so. Uh, Probably the most notable example for me is that since moving from sort of the countryside to the city,
Hmm.
it's so much more. There's so much more noise and sort of busyness and kind of hype going on here that it's that really comes out in your music. I've had to kind of learn to just be cool with noise because you just have to. You have to when you live in a city. You'd not mind if there's kind of cars and traffic noise and people talking, and that has really influenced my music because I've also started to just use much more noisy processes in the way I produce, which is
Hmm.
great fun. It's kind of like embracing the imperfection in what you do because it's actually, I think when I was just starting to produce, I just wanted to try and record things as well as possible and edit things so that they sounded as perfect as possible.
Hmm.
And I kind of have realized little bit older that actually it's the imperfect bits that make a record interesting. You know, if you just have a perfectly played thing, it's not particularly exciting to listen to. So you just need to sort of artistically imperfect stuff in there.
I totally agree. Totally agree with you.
Cool.
Because I write some music myself, and I like imperfection in there. You know, instead of it being exactly like say, oh well, I kind of fudged that note a little bit or something, but I leave it. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be perfect because I think if you go into
Yeah.
too much perfection, again, I think it's cutting down on your creative process. If you're trying to go so perfection, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's about keeping perspective, just sort of what's the most important thing. And the most important thing is the vibe.
Hmm.
Like, you know, you can have a great bit of music that's recorded really badly, but just plays really well. And I really happily listen to it much more than a really sterile bit of music that's like super
Right.
well produced, but, you know, it's
Got no
just
soul,
got
kind
no,
of.
exactly, got no soul.
So in 2014, you composed and produced the soundtrack for the Universal Pictures feature film, The Knife That Killed Me. How did that come
Yeah, yeah.
about?
Uh, I was playing a bass solo set in a bar, and the director was in the bar.
Wow.
I'd agreed to fill in. I had a friend's band, and their bassist was ill, so I agreed to fill in for a one-off show in a city.
Mm,
And so we got in the van and went there, and then it turned out there was no support act. So I agreed. I just said I'll just do like some bass solo stuff
hmm.
and just improvised on the bass for half an hour. And somehow that got me a film soundtrack job.
That is just amazing. And I love, like, I put the trailer up on my arts and music page on Facebook. And
Oh, cool.
yeah, it's just fantastic. It's fantastic, man. I love the way you just, that just, it just fits, man. really fits. It's beautiful.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Even though the movie's kind of rough, but
Yeah, the movie's kind of rough, but it was, I think, sort of 24, 25, 2004. Yeah, anyway. And it pretty much the first time anyone would kind of put real money and a real opportunity on the table in front of me to like make music. And it was such a good confidence boost to discover that I could write a 90-minute soundtrack in a month, and also, discover that people were sort of putting value on what I was doing, and then so it still gives you the confidence to think, okay, well, I should put more time into this and really start putting it out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you find it? Did you find it was difficult at all?
I think the thing I had to learn most was the sort of the people politics of it. Sort of writing the music turned out to come quite easily because it's just like writing any other composition, but you edit it very closely to film. But there's like I've never done anything working with a director before, particularly not one who's signing your paycheck. So sort of that there are all these just discussions going on, and you think you've got the perfect bit of music. And I didn't realize at the time that it was kind of my job to convince them that it was the perfect bit of music. Mm-hmm. Just somebody would say, I think it needs to be a bit more like this. And I'd just go, oh, that's a terrible idea, but let's try it.
Right.
And so it just it is a collaborative process doing a film soundtrack between you and the directors.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's learning how to do that so that everyone feels good about the process is really a trick. That's kind of the trick to being a film composer.
Did you go into like a nice studio and do it, or how'd you do it?
I did most of it at home.
Really?
And then, yeah, a lot of the piano and the electronic stuff is all done kind of in my bedroom, basically. And then we did 2 days they had access to a recording studio. So we did 2 days there to do some sort of loud distorted guitars. And we also recorded a small choir, which was enormously complicated and basically didn't make it onto the soundtrack at all. But It was a fun experience. Mm-hmm.
So do you enjoy film composing?
Absolutely. I would like to do more of it, actually. I've done a number of short films and documentaries since then, and really every time it's always felt really fun to do it because it's such a strong way to get an emotion across.
Can you name a few of those? Can you name a few of those?
A few of the films.
Yeah, some of the other stuff since then.
I've worked a lot with a company called Relevant Films, which is a friend of mine. He's done a number of really great documentaries in developing countries and other parts of the world, sort of doing kind of expose type things, a little bit sort of Vice documentary style, if you know Vice. But it's nothing particularly. There's nothing particularly mainstream. It's just sort of been more low key projects. But it's fun just putting stuff together.
So, what production process has been used for your first full album?
The most, or?
Yeah, I mean, what kind of a production process? Is it still you doing it at home, or with the label? Or are you doing it in like a studio more, or?
My home studio has got a little bit out of control, so I've recently moved it into an actual other studio, which is just nearby, and I did a lot of it just that way. Mm-hmm. I really wanted to kind of pick up from the being imperfect thing from earlier. I sort of made the decision I just wanted to do all the vocal takes in a day and all the piano takes in a day, and just like work with that and just try and capture a day. And really, if it was a good day, then I could make a good record, and if it wasn't a good day, then I'd need to do another day. And so I did that. So I booked 2 days in a friend's studio who had very nice microphones and a really good piano, and we just over 6 or 7 hours just did the takes for everything. And then I sat down, then I took it home to sort of the home studio and sat down with it for the next month, and really worked a lot on processing. I used a lot of old reel-to-reel machines and some analog EQs and that kind of thing.
I was going to ask you about that stuff because I had a feeling that you were kind of an old school, still tape kind of guy.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of using my laptop, actually. I mean, You have to use it because It's so powerful for mixing, but definitely on the creative process, I just would rather not be using something that I also do my work emails on. So I've got really into the studio. I've got sort of a tape machine set up and a lot of analog synthesizers, and everything can run without needing any computer on at all. They're all just patched through to the speakers. And so I do a lot of music just by, improvising and recording improvisations to tape and then pulling them into the laptop and editing them together to make them a bit less half-hour jam-like.
Is the song Fade written from a real experience in your life?
Yeah, but it's not too literal. I try and never write songs, and I never tell anyone what a song is about, because I always feel that if it's a good song, then it should be something that people relate to themselves. And, the lyrics might be personal to me, but my experiences probably aren't that relevant to somebody else. But the way that I experienced them might be relevant to somebody else. So that I always try and leave explanations and write my lyrics so that it's not too literal. It's a bit more open-ended, so you can kind of read into it in a couple of different ways depending on how you want to approach the song. But Fade is written about a sort of particular sort of situation, and then but it was written quite a long time after it, more like reflecting back on how things were.
The video itself, the Fade video, did the director come up with that certain video style that's on that thing?
No, that was a friend of mine who's a visual artist. He works with digital medium. And we'd hired a director who'd come up with quite a elaborate storyline for a video. And partway through the process, it sort of became apparent that it wasn't really going to work out. And we were a little bit up against a deadline. So we took the footage that we did have of just me playing the piano and sent it to my friend and just said, can you mess around with this and do something interesting? And so he just put together this edit and did all the visual processing.
I think it's great.
And I think it's really cool. And what I like about it was absolutely not what we planned. We were planning a sort of more traditional cinematic looking thing, but actually what we made was something much more interesting.
Here's a video from Tom Adams, Fade.
Whisper goodbye and finally walk away. It's the last time, but the road back home feels longer now. Remember that night we promised with young hearts, with your hand in mine, but forever did not last a long time. And I'm holding all the memories dear, and I'm holding all the memories dear, and I'm holding all the memories dear. 6 months have passed that we can't ignore. The light slowly fades, but what do you see when you close your eyes?
Do you have any other interest?
Any other interests?
Yeah.
Musically or artistically or?
Artistically, like photography or?
I've done a little bit of photography. More recently, I've just been getting into painting, which is quite fun. And I make Lego.
Oh yeah.
That's sort of, that's another thing I got back to more recently. I loved making Lego when I was a kid. And I just discovered online there are whole communities of people kind of using it to build art rather than to build spaceships or whatever. And it was a medium that I was really familiar with because I'd spent so many hours playing Lego when I was a kid. So I just started playing around with it again, discovered actually it's a very easily expressive thing.
How did Max Richter's Berlin by Overnight come about for you, which was what, released by Deutsche Grammophon?
That was actually a complete chance again. There's a lot of complete chance in everything that's happened so far in my career, I think. But I had a video on YouTube of me playing the piano and running it through some software that I'd written to process the piano. And it had 300 views, or, it was one of those videos you put on YouTube and disappears off into some black hole somewhere. But for some reason, the A&R guy from Deutsche Grammophon watched it and just sent me an email saying, "Hey, I just saw this random video on YouTube. Do you want to meet up? Are you ever in Berlin?" And as it happened, I was just going to be in Berlin for the first time the following week. So we met up and got on really well. And he soon after commissioned the remix, which was great. But I have no idea.
Yeah.
I've got no idea why he was watching that video. Like,
you know what? He looked in the correct black hole, I guess.
I guess so, yeah.
Teenage Engineering OP1. How influential is it in your compositions?
It's becoming more so again. When I first bought it, I used it a lot just to make kind of hip-hop beat tape style stuff, which was a lot of fun. And there's a really good online community of people sharing music and sharing tips based around the forum that they run. But what I really like about it as a piece of equipment is that it does everything, but it doesn't do anything at all well. But it's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. You don't have a Swiss Army knife because it's got the best screwdriver in your toolbox, but you just have it because if you do need a screwdriver, it's got one.
It's there.
It's there. And I think I really like that about it because I end up using it almost all the time, but in a completely different role every time. You just think, I really need something to just loop a 16-bar synth sequence. And I don't have any. The OP1 can do it.
And you use it live too?
I used to. I haven't used it for the last year just because I shifted to doing everything on laptop. So I started to kind of, I had to start flying to shows around Europe and realized that carrying kilograms worth of equipment was exhausting. So
yeah. So do you, how are you using your bass lines then? Or you still have a little keyboard, you're using something else, or?
I have a little keyboard and I've got a Moog synthesizer in the studio and I just sample notes off that and play them off a sampler keyboard basically. And I'm running, the main part of my live set is running a Max MSP patch. I don't know if Max MSP is like a coding language that lets you it's like lots of virtual guitar pedals for music, but at a much deeper level. And so I spent a lot of time when I was studying at university learning about this coding software. And I wrote some software that kind of creates these washes of sounds as you play input in. So it kind of takes what you're recording on the piano and chops it up into tiny grains of sort of 60 or 70 milliseconds and then messes them around and sends back this texture which is made out of your piano sound. And that's fortunately runs in software called Ableton. And so for my live set, I have a microphone in the piano and I run that through this software in Ableton. And so I've also just put the bass sounds into Ableton as well.
Are they triggered at all? Or is it just
no,
the sound through the microphone somehow makes it?
Just through the sound, it's got a threshold level basically. So if you play a loud note, then it'll start recording. And it'll record for 20 seconds, say, and just chop up whatever you recorded and play it back to you. And every time you play a new loud note that's over a particular threshold, it starts the process again.
Wow. That's really neat. That's neat.
Yeah, it's taken a while to get it really working smoothly.
Fine tune that, huh? To fine tune.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the way it works now is you can basically play a chord and it'll just infinitely sustain your chords with interesting octave textures of the chord until you play a new chord.
Mm-hmm. Your new, this is a full album coming out, right?
Yeah, full album.
In May. This year?
May on the 5th.
May 5th. Is it Voyages by
Yes.
Starlight, or is it a different name now?
I did an EP last year that was called Voyages by Starlight.
Okay.
And this record is called Silence.
Silence. Okay. And I saw the track lineup, and I wasn't familiar with some of the lineup of the songs. So did you write new material?
Yeah, they're all new songs,
They're all new songs.
or all previously unreleased songs.
So do you have any plans to come to the U.S.?
I'd love to come to the US. I've never been on holiday or anything, actually, but I have a number of friends on the West Coast that I'd want to visit.
Well, you have one in the East now, too.
Yeah, it's super. It's just thousands of miles apart.
Yeah.
I always find it a bit funny visiting the US because it's such an enormously, I think you could spend months in each state absorbing completely different things.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, but musically, it's quite hard to get over there and tour and make it work out financially. I think you really need to string a number of days together and take it seriously.
And where can people find you on the internet?
If you go to tomadams.eu, that's my website. Mm-hmm. And I also use, because Tom Adams is such a common name, I use that sort of hashtag /fall into static.
And that's your YouTube, that is your personal YouTube page?
Yeah, that's my YouTube, and that's also on Facebook and SoundCloud and Twitter, and God, I'm probably too connected to the internet these days.
That's a good thing, though. It's a good thing. Well, Tom, I think that's going to wrap it up, man. I just thank you so much for being on. It's been great pleasure
thank you
for me.
All right, thanks a lot,
Have
Victor.
a great day.
Take care.
Bye.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Thank you for watching Arts and Music. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, please email us at artsandmusicpgh@yahoo.com. And until next time, peace.